So, what was your journey like when becoming a filmmaker, and when did you realize that that's what you wanted to pursue, and how did you get into the industry?
When I was really young, I would say probably around 9, 10 or so, I remember very vividly I was in my cousin's basement and they had talked about this incredible movie with dinosaurs. And I was like, what is this? I got to see it. And it was not Land Before Time. It was actually Jurassic Park. And I was a little too young to watch it. But they had it on VHS, and it really blew my mind. I think I was just so impressed by how it was able to kind of completely transport me into this new world where dinosaurs, in my mind, could actually exist. And then later in life, I realized that the film also was able to speak to so many different themes and topics about playing God, about creation. And I think even from that point, I realized that the level of imagination, the power to move you and be excited via entertainment was just so inspiring that it really motivated me to ask the one question: how does one get involved to make something like that? And I would say that over the years, going from that little bit to becoming an early teen, I was able to get more exposure. My parents were both working, and I would become one of those Blockbuster fiends. So Blockbuster is a video rental store where on the way back home, you'd rent different TV shows and movies. And another point that I faced was this identity issue. I was raised with Eastern values at home. My parents were first-generation immigrants from Hong Kong. And I was also born and raised here, so I was raised with Western values at school. And there was always this kind of disconnect that I had. And through watching and absorbing a lot of different TV shows and movies, watching through Blockbuster as my personal homework for fun, I realized that there are so many different ways to experience the world and time periods through that medium. And movies like Gattaca were certain touchstone films for me, and that really became the inspiration for why I wanted to enter the business and then eventually learn what a director was, and that was the dream job.
Love it. That's actually such an interesting journey. I love that Jurassic Park set off your career.
Jurassic Park started it off. I mean, I just remember being at that age, just not fully comprehending how it was fully done. Mm-hmm. And at that age, what you see is what you believe, right? And obviously it's not real, but it felt so alive and so active, and you could feel the stakes of these characters you care for. And I remember even at that age, after even finishing the film, I was so insistent on watching it all over again because the thrill ride of that was just so unlike anything I'd seen before. And so I think that's one of the also unique properties of film, is the ability to transport you to places that don't exist necessarily, but can also teach you something about yourself. And through that, I was just, that again was the bedrock of inspiration that led me to be a director.
And I love that you're able now to create like that exact magic that you're describing for other people.
Yeah.
Me and Hannah were just reflecting. I recently did a rewatch of The QB and Me.
Oh.
Iconic. And you really do create that world. It's like so fun to just like step into the universe of a movie and into other people's lives. And I just love the way that you're describing that. It's so interesting. In a similar topic, you worked across photography, commercials, shorts, television, and feature films. What excites you most about working in multiple different formats like that?
So knowing the journey of how to become a director, it's a very long journey. Obviously it takes all the different steps to kind of prove yourself. I had to traverse and experience different mediums to kind of get here. And what I do enjoy the most is the fact that all of these different mediums are actually supporting one another. They actually have the ability to build upon in terms of skill sets. Mm-hmm. At the end of the day, whether you're doing painting, sketching, drawing, photography, short films, commercials, it's all a form of storytelling. And what I like is the very fact that the way you absorb the the information, the way you are exposed to the different art forms, actually it challenges you as a creator to think about how to actually best express your idea through that medium, through that audience. So for example, a short film most often can be seen at a film festival like TIFF, and it can be seen in a big audience, or it can also be viewed on YouTube. Right now, obviously, we have social media being very present and ubiquitous. Creators also have to think about how do we absorb and how do we watch this kind of entertainment. And the way that you had to craft that kind of stuff, I found was actually quite useful because you just have to think about how the medium also changes. And so, for instance, we know that the attention span on social media is relatively shorter. It's not a bad thing. That's just the nature of the medium. And so the way you craft the story, the way you perhaps give a hook within the first 5 seconds is just the reality that you have to adapt to. So even back in the day when I was shooting photography, it was mostly either experienced by flipping through a magazine or being seen in a photo gallery, in an actual art gallery. Two very, very different experiences. And now with Instagram, it's also completely changed the game because now you can just scroll through the image so much faster versus in an art gallery where there's a certain expectation and also a place where you can sit, let the image breathe, and digest it for a greater period of time, also with the curation of all the other images in the room. So I think that what I've taken away is the very notion that as a creator, you have to always serve the audience in the medium with which it's being delivered. So to become a filmmaker, I began from photography. Photography then led to digital videos, music videos. That eventually became scripted into short films. Short films led to TV commercials, and TV commercials led to TV shows, and TV shows led to words movies. But I'd have to say that through it all, my interest in across all the different media is still there. I still shoot photography. I still shoot Instagram shorts, reels. I still do short films, TV commercials, and obviously movies. And there's a lot that can be learned from, again, the different methodologies across.
And I just had a quick question there. You were talking a bit about sort of like our shrinking attention spans, which is obviously a pretty hot topic right now in the film community. And I like the way that you're framing this as sort of just a thing, like one of those things that we're adapting to as creators. What is your sort of message for maybe those people who are feeling a bit discouraged that film is changing in that sort of way? And maybe like a bit of advice on like leaning into short form content, if that's something you encourage?
I don't think any of these media will actually fade away. I think that what we're just seeing is the fact that the pie is set, and now we're just subdividing it into different pieces. And so film being shown and experienced in a theater is just getting smaller, but it will never disappear. I think people were always talking about how even celluloid was going to disappear, but no, it's still very much around. Same with 35 millimeter photography. It's still around. It's just that there are so many different types of media that exist. So I would say, I don't think people should be discouraged to the fact that short form content is exploding. I think it's just going to be yet another piece of the pie. And if there's one takeaway, it's just to know your audience and know how each individual media and medium is consumed. And so when you craft your story, factor that in terms of your approach. Think about the framing, think about the pacing, think about how much space there is to breathe or not breathe. And I think that that's part of the new dialogue that we must have as creators, is to know which medium do you want to pursue first. Again, you can sort of go across all of them. And then how best do you tackle it?
I think that's like a really insightful way of putting it, like the pie metaphor, I think. Like, yeah, and you were talking about photography, and I'm just also like personally curious, how did your background in photography influence your filmmaking? Like, photography is kind of a cornerstone of filmmaking, and it's kind of, your understanding of photography is fundamental. So how did you translate that to your film work?
A lot of my education, I'd never studied film or TV, was to simply absorb a lot. I would look at photo books in the library. I would download images, scan through Pinterest, but also watch a lot of film and TV. And what I realized was that photography has a different language you have to be considerate of. So back to what I said before about how know your audience and know the medium. The way I describe the difference first is that photography is a very interpretive medium, because when you shoot a shot, an audience member doesn't understand the context with whether that image that you present is the beginning of the story, the middle of the story, or the end. Let's say, for example, concretely, you have, I take a photo, whether it's fictional or non-fictional, of a character, a person who is crying on the street, let's just say. Well, why is a person crying? Is this at the end of the journey because someone has passed away? Is it tears of joy? The fact that it's the beginning of a story that this person just won the lottery and now has a possibility of creating something entirely new. So photography is a medium where it really requires the audience to fill in the gaps. You take the image, you look at the setting, you look at the character, the way the person is dressed, the way it's lit, the scene, the mise en scène, and ask, what is this image all about? And you have to use your personal experiences to fill in the gaps. And that's part of the fun of that interpretive medium. So onto the question of how does photography inform my filmmaking, it's sort of using all those techniques. So what do you actually have control over? You have control over direction, assuming you're capturing a model or a talent or an actor, and you're looking to evoke something. So you have to direct the actor. And then also evoking a sort of theme or tone by using lighting, by using framing, lens choices. So are you using a wide angle lens where you're pulling the subject away from the background, or using a tight lens which compresses the scene so the background pulls much closer to the subject matter, and as a result, perhaps it feels more claustrophobic or more intimate. These are all the different questions that you have to be mindful of, and what I've taken away from photography is a better control of all those different elements when it comes to storytelling in film. The reality is today, even when I was developing Sideline, The QB and Me, my first feature film, I was also very mindful of this changing dynamic. So I knew the film can be experienced in a theater, which we had in the premiere. The film can also be experienced on a TV, streamed on Tubi. It can also be watched on a cell phone for those that are watching it in the subway. And I don't find that a form of discouragement. I actually find that you just have to be mindful of these things. So the way I use photography and how it helped me in directing Sideline, The QB and Me is asking what coverage is really required. How can I tell the story? How can I tell the scene? And how can I let the audience experience the scene with as few cuts as possible or with more cuts? And so a lot of these questions come to mind of using all those different techniques I mentioned from photography and applying that into filmmaking. And the end result is that I find it actually has made me, and I've been told, a much more efficient filmmaker, because I know exactly how everything is arranged and coordinated and how audiences can experience it, from a cell phone on the street to a theater.
That's fantastic. Sorry, that was a really, really good answer.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, so like on the topic of Silent, it was obviously a huge success.
Yeah.
What was that experience like for you, working on a major studio project as your first feature, and also working with such like a young and relevant cast of actors?
I have to say that a lot of my training, for those who don't know, I began again in TV, which to me was very fundamental, and also understanding the politics. So for all young filmmakers out there, a lot of what we have to do in filmmaking is requiring the help and support of producers, people who finance the project. Unless you can finance it yourself, there are many different stakeholders. And with different stakeholders, you have different opinions. And in particular, when it comes to a TV show requires that you have to follow the vision of a showrunner and follow the mandates of the network. So you have all these people chiming in with different expectations. And I think that my success has been understanding how to navigate all of that while staying true to my voice. So to answer the question more succinctly about the studio, it's that I was able to very quickly, through my experience, learn how to ask the right questions of the studio. What does the studio want from this? For instance, back to the whole medium thing. Like, is Silent the QB&Me, from their perspective, meant to be seen on a cell phone more, or seen more on a TV screen, or seen more on a laptop? And that fundamental question does change the way you direct a movie, because it, again, changes the pace. If the pace has to be a lot faster or slower, if it requires more exposition, more repetition, or not, you have to build that all into the process. I think I was very lucky in that I had so many years of experience. Actually, I say that. I've actually had a very short, very condensed experience working in TV that I was able to do over 10 episodes of TV before I got into Sideline. So that was also a concerted choice. There were other feature offers prior to Sidelined, and the reason why I waited that long was because I really wanted to experience as much as possible all the different types of notes that can be received by different networks. Say a note from Netflix, how they deliver the note can be completely different from CBC or Hulu or you name it. And working with so many different producers, again, you will begin to understand the different possible frameworks, the different possible opinions they could have. And that, again, arms you with all the different tools to be able to meet their expectations while, again, allowing you to be an artist and convey the scene or the entire movie the way you want it to. So that's part one. The second question is really about, what's it like working with a young cast? Well, I think it's a really exciting time because I've also built my career on working with a lot of non-actors. There were some child actors that I worked with on, say, Run the Burbs, which is a great CBC show. And at the time, a lot of these young kid actors perhaps was among their first roles. And I think that experience allowed me to learn all the different possible techniques, actually completely motivated me to take acting classes. By taking acting classes myself, never to be an actor, I really have no interest in ever acting. I think I'm terrible. But the point is that I learned very quickly all the different methodologies that they have and how actors require different dynamics of, like, how do you respond to the Meisner technique? How do you respond to Stanislavski's? Like, the point is that every actor needs to respond to something else.
Yeah.
And by understanding all the different styles that actors come with, whether they have experience or no experience, became invaluable. So working with a young cast, I find that they're very modular and moldable. You can learn a lot from their experience or lack of experience, and leaning on either other actors that have more experience to help deliver a completely different response or action. So a really good concrete way to kind of visualize it is that I see acting as an action and response. So for instance, you're most often than not, we know there are many instances where sometimes actors are acting against a green ball or tennis ball, but in most cases, the dream scenario is to always have the actors in the same room reacting to each other. And one technique that I've used successfully is to sometimes not even direct the actor that's being filmed for their response, but directing the other actor that's opposite them. Because, if you were to ask the other actor to punish the actor that's actually on screen, that may actually motivate them to create a different response, that one that you're actually looking for. So I find that working with a young cast, because they often don't come with all the different techniques, it's both a blessing sometimes and also a curse. But again, arming yourself with the experience of going through acting classes and knowing all the different ways that they liked to be directed and worked with, it was critical. And also, I think the beauty of being working with young actors is that they also come with a lot of different, with a lot of energy and a lot of excitement. And yeah, it's a business that requires extreme stamina. Like, the hours and days are so long, and it just requires this relentless passion, dedication, rest, and discipline for the best work. So it's kind of a long way to say that there's a lot that I love working with young actors, and there's also a lot that I had to do to prepare to work with a young cast.
I think that passion is certainly translating, and like, just hearing you talk, like, you've definitely filled your toolkit with everything that you could possibly need. And I think that's such like a wonderful way to go about something that you care so much about, and in this case, film. Piggybacking off of Cue Me and Me, I guess like the "not my name" quarterback line has kind of worked its way into meme culture and become a really quotable and recognizable part of the film. And so, how do you feel about that virality?
I think it's great. To be perfectly honest, some people always ask the question, was that ever designed? No. There was no world in which we would design something like that to go viral. Of course, let's be honest, I also grew up on Instagram and TikTok and Snapchat, and I'm fully aware of how it can be very useful to kind of get your movie or TV show out there and get something viral, but you can't design something to be viral. And that moment was certainly not planned to be viral. But I love it. I love it because at the end of the day, these memes are more often than not there to mock the project, but to celebrate an aspect of the film. And bottom line, it brings attention to their project. And if you have more eyeballs that get to see it, whether they like it or don't like it, you're getting your work out there. And as a director, all I want is for my projects to be seen by as many people as possible. So if it leads to a meme that goes viral, that helps everyone.
That's awesome.
And honestly, the line is iconic, guys. Let's be real, it's iconic. Not my name, quarterback.
Oh, yes.
Do you have any other moments in that film that you wish were as viral or that you feel like should be celebrated more?
I get a little emotional even thinking about it because obviously one of the cast members has passed away, the late legendary James Van Der Beek. And I think that one thing I wished I saw more of growing up, and I didn't have the exposure by being perhaps a little too young watching these movies and TV shows, is sharing different dynamics. And so, for instance, we know that kids these days, or even adults, are sometimes so isolated with their cell phones and their own social circles that there isn't as much dialogue between generations. And I found that one really meaningful scene for us was the conversation between Noah Beck's character Drayton as well as James Van Der Beek's character Leroy. And that father and son conversation was just so healthy, it was so cathartic that I do wish that people would share that a bit more. And not to say that it's a beautiful, funny scene. In fact, it's quite sad and melancholic, but it's very grounded, very real, and a reminder to talk to your parents, open yourself up for conversation, and never let things remain bottled up. And if you have a feeling, a thought, an experience that needs to be shared, share it. And I think that's what that scene meant to us. And I would really want people to experience it and learn.
So you've lived in different cities internationally, but you always kind of return to Toronto. How has this city shaped how you are as an artist?
Well, as we all know, we all love the city. And I was born and raised here. My love for the city is just absolute. And the reason is really because it gave my parents an opportunity. I was raised by the city. And the fact that we do have access to so many different cultures, we are really one of the most multicultural cities in the world, is a very also valuable tool and a point of access for a lot of young filmmakers who can learn about different cultures and different ways of living. And that's really important because, especially when you move into TV, you'd often sometimes will encounter cultures that you don't understand and that you don't know. And the fact that everything really is at your doorstep gives us a lot of possibility to ask questions. I mean, I remember in preparation for some TV shows, it was extremely valuable for me to just knock on some doors, go in some Facebook groups and just open the question, open the dialogue. Like, hey, I have some questions about your culture. I want to do it right, do it justice, and would just love to just ask away these different things. For instance, one thing that came up was not all Asian cultures are the same, and what that actually, and it actually applied very appropriately for Sidelined, because the lead actor is Filipino, and I really wanted to inject some of that culture into the film. I'm Chinese, and despite China, or rather Hong Kong culture and Filipino culture being close by, they're independent nations that have completely different philosophies and symbols. And so for that one, what I did, what I realized, what I learned was that there is a beautiful symbol that's a sun in the form of a pendant, often passed down from a mother to a daughter. And that became a unscripted plot device and prop that was made just for the character, and it honors the character really well. And so anytime Sienna Agudan, the beautiful and wonderfully talented actor who plays Dallas, the character, she was able to use that whenever she felt it was necessary in remembering her mother. So again, and that all came about because of asking her the right questions and being able to speak to local people in the Filipino culture. Yeah.
And Toronto is such a wonderful community, and it's literally the place to be, to learn about stuff like
to learn about all the kind of stuff, and we have access to it. So tap into it, and
why not?
Why not? And it also completely enriches your life as well to be able to know what perspectives are out there.
Definitely.
So yeah, I'm gonna pivot it to
Sure,
your
of course.
TV show. So you've directed a number of hit television series, including Kim's Convenience, Children Ruin Everything, and Gunham Project. And what are the similarities and differences between working in television versus a feature?
That's a great question, because it may not be immediately obvious, but one thing to note about television is that oftentimes most shows follow a continuum. So you have a series of characters that, survive or have a through line for an entire season or seasons. And some people don't realize this, but directors oftentimes only direct a few episodes, a block of episodes, sometimes an entire season, but more often than not, we sometimes even only just do one episode, depending on how the show is managed. And I think it's important to note that for television, it's all about understanding the vision of the showrunner as well as the network, which is completely different from movies, because when you have a single visionary and multiple directors, you have to ask even more questions. What's the visual language of the show? Just because you may have a more maybe French New Wave personal style doesn't necessarily mean that it would apply well into the show that has already an established visual language. So the best way I can describe it is that when you join a TV show, you are a guest and you're being invited into this family that already exists. And your job is not to change the family dynamic, but learn how the family operates, all the different quirks about it, and then for you to maintain that continuum that through line so that when you watch one episode to the next episode, you don't feel the difference. You're there to receive the baton from another director's episode, learn how they end their episode so you can also continue that and take the baton. You do your thing, following the same vision, and then pass the baton on. So theoretically, the audience members won't even necessarily feel or even know that different directors worked on the same show. So it's one continuous story. Completely different from a movie where the director, generally speaking, has to paint and tell the story once upon a time, the beginning, middle, and conclusive end. Even if there are some cliffhangers that lead to a sequel or so, you're still telling one contained story that's meant to be viewed as one entity, end to end. So I think that that's a very key distinction, is to know that one is more of a work to hire type thing, unless you're a producing director, and the other is more allows you as a director to, or as a filmmaker, to have much more control end to end, and establish and set the visual language that you feel is best for your story.